5 years ago, our love story started with a dropped call, a nervous laugh, and two blue dots on a map. We lived in different countries, braced by stubborn oceans, closed borders, and complicated paperwork. Yet somehow, across static and time zones, we built a life in messages, midnight coffees, and promises that held even when planes stopped flying. Tonight, we open our photo boxes and our hearts, and tell you how we survived long distance and immigration together against odds. If our journey resonates, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Your support helps couples across borders find hope and courage. I'm Evan, and that's my husband Mateo, behind the camera right now pretending not to smile because he knows this whole story by heart. He still laughs at the same places, still gets quiet when I talk about the airport goodbyes, and still rolls his eyes when I get sentimental about paperwork. Yes, paperwork. When you survive long distance and immigration together, you earn the right to get sentimental about the unromantic stuff too, forms, stamps, and the weight of an envelope that can change your life. We met on a Tuesday that felt like any other. Cleveland had been gray for a week, with that kind of drizzle that makes everything look like it's been painted with a damp brush. I had this habit of practicing Spanish on a language app after work, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of tea and a bowl that used to hold a plant I definitely overwatered. Mateo popped up because I'd marked my interests as coffee, dogs, old movies, and his profile said he'd talk your ear off about all three. He says he noticed my smile first. I noticed his laugh. It came out like a warm lamp switching on. We typed in short, polite sentences at first, the way strangers do when they're trying to be interesting but not too much. Then we moved to voice messages. Mine were too long. His were too musical. We both pretended the time difference wasn't as big as it was. A few weeks later, we had our first video call. Technology did what technology does. It dropped us 3 times and froze on a ridiculous face both of us will never forget. But we stayed. I showed him the view from my balcony, a maple tree losing its leaves. He showed me the view from his, a street in Mexico City with a tamalero calling out in the morning, "Tamalitos Oaxaqueños." He tried to teach me how to say it the right way. I tried and failed, and he laughed until he cried. He tells me that's the moment he knew. I tell him I knew when he asked about my grandfather right after I mentioned him, and he remembered the details, his name, the kind of fishing lure he liked. When someone hears the small things, you take notice. Our days fell into a rhythm. Morning texts from him with photos of sunlight on a tile floor. Lunchtime notes from me about the endless line at the post office. Evenings with the glow of a screen and his face, and that feeling that sneaks up on you when you realize you're building something together, brick by careful brick. We had movie nights apart but together. That's a thing you can do, you know. Press play on the same movie and talk through it like you're sharing a couch. We watched black and white films and the worst holiday romances we could find. He'd pause during the syrupy parts to say, "Okay, but we're better than this," and I'd say, "Yes, because our plot has paperwork." We laughed, and it became our running joke. 6 months in, I bought a plane ticket. My hands shook when I clicked confirm. I told my mother, because I tell my mother everything, and she worried because that's what mothers do. But she also printed me a list of Spanish phrases with her neat teacher handwriting. A week before I flew, Mateo's abuela called me on video. She wanted to see my face. She wore a sweater the color of a dawn sky and said she had questions. Did I eat? Did I know how to dance badly enough to brave a family party? Did I understand how to pretend not to hear a nosy neighbor? I answered honestly. She nodded once, and then she smiled so wide it erased every fear I didn't know I had. I landed into air that smelled like warm corn and car exhaust. And for the first time in my life, I thought a city sounded like a person. I saw him before he saw me. He was bouncing on his heels near the arrival sign, holding a paper cup with my name written wrong on it in black marker. He always pretends the barista misunderstood, but he still does the same mistake when he wants me to laugh. He turned, and we didn't say anything for a second. There's a quiet that happens before a first hug that's been waiting for 6 months. It's like the world leans in and listens. He smelled like citrus and laundry soap. His hands were warm even though the airport was cold. We hugged like we had practiced in our minds 100 times, then pulled back, faces bright, embarrassed, ecstatic. We took a cab with windows down, and he pointed out everything like a kid showing off a diorama. That bakery has the best conscience. That park is where my cousins rollerblade and fall spectacularly. That mural is new, but it already feels old. I pressed it all into memory the way you press a leaf in a heavy book. We spent that first week walking until our feet ached. We bought fruit from a man who cut it with a small knife and sprinkled chili over mine because I asked for it, como él, like him. We read the signs at a museum and made up stories about the people in the paintings. We stood at a crosswalk and kissed, quick and sure, like we'd been doing it for years, and also like it was brand new. At night, we lay side by side on the bed in his small apartment, our shoulders touching, talking about nothing and everything, letting discovery take its time. There is a sweetness in saying goodnight in the same room after months of saying it to a screen. Not everything has to be fireworks. Sometimes the miracle is the quiet. I cried at the airport when I left. I didn't think I would because I had told myself to be brave for him, to make this easier. But there's something about that last glance before the security line swallows you up. We bought matching bracelets at a market the day before. Thin woven ones that looked like they'd snap if you breathed wrong. We joked they were low-budget promise rings. Mine dug into my wrist while I tried not to look back. He stood on his tiptoes, like he could send his heart higher if he did. Long distance isn't romantic. It's romantic sometimes, yes, in the ways people post about. Letters in pretty envelopes, surprises in the mail, those long conversations that stretch until dawn. But it's also calendars and waiting, and the shockingly non-cinematic way tears can show up when your Wi-Fi drops in the middle of something important. It's wanting to reach across a nightstand, across a city, across a country, and feeling the ache of that not being possible. It's learning to tell the difference between a bad day and a bad thought. It's learning to say, I'm scared, without making it the other person's job to fix it instantly. We made rules. Not the kind you write down and sign, but the kind you repeat until they've got their own corners and wait. We would never hang up angry. We would tell the truth gently. We would ask for reassurance plainly, even if it felt embarrassing. We would try to end the day with good words, even if the day was rude to us. We made rituals. Monday night lists of small gratitude. Thursday photos of whatever sky we had. Sunday coffee together, even if one of us was holding a mug in the dark. It didn't make distance easy, but it made it less lonely. Our families became part of the picture. My mother sent him recipes written like a conversation with "if you're feeling fancy" notes in the margins. His abuela taught me a lullaby just because she said everyone should know one. My sister called him to complain about work, and he listened earnestly. Then he called me to tell me he felt honored enough to be part of someone's everyday annoyance. That's when I knew we were woven into each other's lives, not just standing at the edge. 2 years in, the world shut down. Flights disappeared from the departure boards. We learned the language of restrictions and exceptions we never asked to learn. We learned the texture of waiting. Heavy, stubborn, sometimes sharp. We watched small businesses close on his street. We watched my favorite diner put chairs upside down on tables. We made it through days that felt like the inside of a thundercloud. I got sick first, and it was mild, for which I will always be grateful. He called me every morning to listen to me breathe and tell me to drink water. He watched me nap on video, which is a strange intimacy, and we joked about how all this technology frees you to be a mess together. When he came down with it a few weeks later, mine had become a steady voice. I read him the labels of over-the-counter medicines with the same care he had used reading recipes to me. We invented a soup together. I burned the rice on video, and he laughed into his cough. I learned a thing about love then. You can feel helpless and useful at the same time. You can't take the fever away, but you can sit in the heat with someone and pass them water and attention. The conversations about how to be together in one place became heavier, more concrete. Immigration had been a word in our future tense. It became a word in our now. We researched like it was our job. We learned the alphabet soup, I-130, I-864, DS-260. We figured out what those meant in plain language. Petitions, affidavits of support, online forms, medical exams, interviews. We debated fiancé visa or spousal visa. We made a pros and cons list that would have impressed any guidance counselor. We talked to friends who had done it before us, Straight couples, queer couples, people who had sworn they would never memorize another receipt number and then did anyway because love makes you stubborn. We decided on a spousal visa. It meant we would get married first, and then he would enter as a permanent resident. The journey through the U.S. government systems can be as slow as a winter stream. But we learned that the fiancé route could be slower then too, and we wanted a path that felt like we were building our life right away. He proposed to me in a kitchen, which I think is the most romantic place in the world if you're a person who loves small lights and steady heat and things that rise. It was late, and we'd just finished cleaning up. I smelled like dish soap and garlic, and he was barefoot. He had tucked a little ring into a bowl we used for limes. It wasn't hidden well. Mateo is not cagey. He put the bowl in the cabinet where we keep tea, and I opened it. And there it was, like sunlight on a spoon. I turned around, and he had that look that means he's both sure and nervous, a rare and gorgeous combination. He didn't kneel. He reached for my hands with his hands that have a small scar on one knuckle from childhood, and he said, "Evan, will you marry me? Will you build quiet and loud days with me? Will you keep making lists with me and dance badly with me when the music says, 'Try'?" I said yes like a person waking up and recognizing their own pillow. The yes had lived in me for a while. I had just been waiting to say it out loud. We married in a civil ceremony a month later, in a room with bright windows and plants in mismatched pots. My mother watched on a screen balanced on a stack of cookbooks. His cousins hugged us like we were homegrown heroes. We wore suits we picked out together at a shop where the owner found a tie for me that Mateo said made my eyes look trustworthy. We ate cake that tasted like oranges. We danced to a vinyl record because the internet went out for a moment, and someone said, "Use what you have," and that felt like a blessing. The day after the wedding, we started the paperwork in earnest. We set up a table like a command center, folders, sticky notes, highlighters, a scanner that whirred like a distant cicada. We learned to be thorough without losing our minds. We wrote our names so many times that our signatures loosened and then learned to look like us again. We prepared evidence of our life, photos, messages, travel tickets, affidavits from friends who wrote down the bone-deep truth of watching us love each other. We learned to not take it personally that we had to prove something that felt as natural as breathing. The first packet we mailed felt like sending a small raft down a long river. I walked out of the post office holding my copy of the tracking number like it was a relic. We watched it move across a map with a slowness that was not personal but felt personal anyway. Weeks later, a receipt notice came. It was just a letter, black text on white paper, but we took a picture with it like people do with new babies and new cars. After that came the waiting. Waiting is a character in our story. Waiting sits on the couch with us and eats our chips. Waiting sometimes is loud and sometimes is quiet. Waiting can be kind if you give it a job. So we gave our waiting some work to do. We kept learning, in both languages, in both kitchens, on both sides of the map. We scanned our documents twice and put them in a cloud. We joined an online forum where strangers became mentors and cheerleaders. We learned about requests for evidence, those letters that ask you for one more thing, and we learned not to hear them as a judgment so much as a system doing what it does. We also got one. It asked for a clearer copy of a certificate that had a smudge across the important date. We redid it. There are days you get to be frustrated. There are days you get to be resilient. We learned to be both and not apologize. There were hard conversations, too. The kind where you sit with your fear and introduce it to someone else's fear and ask them to be polite to each other. We talked about money. We talked about where we would live, whose home would become home base. We talked about careers and family and the roots you don't see but feel when you tug them. I want to be honest about this because I wish more people were. Love doesn't erase logistics. It makes you brave enough to face them. It makes you patient enough to circle back when the first version of the plan doesn't fit anymore. The day the appointment email arrived, both of our phones buzzed at once. I sat down so fast I missed the chair. He laughed the way you laugh when your heart is sprinting. The interview would be in Ciudad Juarez, which is where Mexico processes a lot of immigrant visas. He would go. I would be on the other end of the phone, the other end of the planet, breathing like a metronome if he needed me to. The week before the interview, we packed the folder like we were making a survival kit. We checked the list 3 times. Passport, birth certificate, marriage certificate, photos, copies of copies. The day before, he went to the medical exam. He wore a shirt we call his Good Luck Blue. He sent me a selfie with a thumbs up and a caption that said, "Your future permanent resident." I saved it in 3 places. I didn't sleep well the night before. I made coffee at 3 a.m. with the intensity of a carpenter. He called me from the hotel hallway. We prayed into the phone. Neither of us is particularly religious, but sometimes talking to something bigger than you calms the part of you that thinks it has to hold up the sky. He walked into the consulate with a folder tucked under his arm. He wore that blue shirt. He wore the bracelet that matched mine. He sent me a photo of the waiting room because some gestures are sacred and some are practical. This is where I am. You can picture it. The interview was not a movie. It was questions asked kindly by a person doing their job. It was dates and details and the small pause the officer took when he saw we'd labeled everything with sticky tabs in Spanish and English. "It makes my life easier," he said. Mateo glowed. He is a person who likes to make life easier for people. I heard the words not with my ears but with the shape of his face as he said them to me later. We were approved. He didn't shout. He said it like a blessing. We cried then, the kind of cry that you do when you've been holding something together for a long time, and someone finally says, "It's okay to put this down." We sat on our separate beds in separate countries and cried together. He told me about the people in the waiting room who smiled at him when they saw the approval slip in his hand, the solidarity of strangers who know the mountain you just climbed. The visa arrived in a week. We bought another plane ticket. This one felt different. It felt like I was buying a door. I scrubbed our apartment like an event was about to happen, which it was. I made a list that would embarrass an Eagle Scout. I asked my neighbor to pick up a welcome banner I had irrationally ordered at midnight. I learned how to make his favorite dish from a friend over FaceTime and made it 3 times because I burned the first batch and oversalted the second. I wanted the third to taste like a promise. I waited at arrivals. My feet would not be still. I love airports for what they can do, but I hate them for the hurt they can cause. This day was a gift. The departure board clicked. People streamed out. A young woman ran into her father's arms. A kid in a dinosaur hoodie dragged a tiny suitcase behind him like a stubborn dog. And then there he was, scanning the crowd like he always does, scared he might miss something important. He saw me and pointed at me as if to say, "You." We walked fast and then slowed down at the last second so the hug would be gentle enough and still strong. He smelled like travel and the sweetest thing you can make without sugar, relief. At home, he stood in the doorway for a moment like he was saying hello to a place as a person. He touched the back of the couch, the door frame, the little ceramic fox my sister made us. He put his suitcase under the bench like he already knew where we put suitcases. We ate the third version of the dish I'd made. He said it tasted like you taste when you try your best on purpose. We set up a small corner for his shoes and another for his books, even though we knew we'd move things around. We went to bed in the same room and slept the way tired birds do, heads tucked in close. The first weeks had a shine on them, like everything was lit from the inside. We went to the Social Security office and sat in seats that were too far apart for how we liked to talk. We took numbers and held hands and whispered through our masks. We went to the bank with a stack of documents and the teller said, "Congratulations," the way a stranger can be part of your day without knowing the story. We went to the DMV where the jokes write themselves. We stood in lines with people trying to get different pieces of their lives in order. We ate lunch in a parking lot on the hood of the car like teenagers. There were challenges, of course. There always are. He missed the sound of his street vendors and the particular way morning light falls on his mother's backyard. He missed his language being the default. I missed the certainty of our old routine, the timing we had perfected out of necessity. We found a therapist who understands that love is brave and culture is deep and that even the happiest moves are losses. We learned to say, "I miss home," as a sentence about geography, not about each other. We learned to build a new home that didn't erase the old one. His first job took a while to find. He is good at many things and excellent at some, but good and excellent don't always translate on paper when you cross borders. He took an English class at night even though he already spoke beautifully because he wanted to learn the quirks, the idioms that make people feel welcomed. He started bringing home phrases like "no biggie" and "go the extra mile." I taught him to say "y'all" when he meant it. And he taught me to say ahorita with the right flexibility because time is a concept but also a feeling. We cooked our way across both of our families. He taught me to make salsas that required patience and a willingness to accept that your hands would smell like heaven and fire. I taught him the pancake recipe my dad had taught me with that precise wrist movement that flips without folding. We shared holidays in the kitchen, inventing new rituals. On Thanksgiving, we put chorizo in the stuffing, and my mother acted scandalized, and then went back for seconds. On Dia de los Muertos, we made an ofrenda on our sideboard with photos of the people who taught us how to love. We told their stories into the camera, and to each other, and to the ceiling when it felt like the right audience. Not everyone understood us right away. At a barbecue, a man we barely knew asked if we were brothers. Mateo took a breath and delivered a masterclass in kindness and clarity. "No, I'm his husband," he said, with a smile that you could lean against if you were tired. The man nodded too fast, embarrassed, and we let it go because sometimes letting go is the charitable option. In the grocery store, an older woman told us she loved our matching masks and asked where we'd found them. Mateo told her the truth. "My husband made them." She lit up at the word, at the ease of it, as if we had handed her a piece of candy she'd forgotten she loved. Then, the green card arrived. It doesn't look like much if you think of beauty as sparkles and grand gestures. It's a small rectangle, green the way parks are public and hopeful. We opened the mailbox together like a little ceremony. We sat on the steps and opened the envelope like you open a letter from someone who lives far away. It felt like the weight of a key. We put it on the table and looked at it the way people look at a sleeping child. We took a picture with it, eyes red like we'd been chopping onions, which we had not. We celebrated by going to the lake. We brought pastries in a paper bag and coffee in a thermos. We sat on a bench that had someone else's name on it, the way benches do when communities love their elders. We watched a dog try and fail to chase a flock of geese. We made a list of the things we had learned since we started. We said them out loud. Say things out loud. That's something we learned. We learned that love is a daily practice, not a prize you collect and display. We learned that bureaucracy can teach you humility if you let it. We learned that there is dignity in asking questions, and there is no shame in not knowing the first time. We learned that our families could expand to hold each other, that my mother could send him a text about a sale on his favorite tea, and his abuela could ask me if I was sleeping enough with the same authority she asks her own grandchildren. We learned that two people can be each other's home without setting fire to the homes that came before. We also learned practical things that I hope help someone watching this. We learned to make copies of everything, to label folders with dates and simple words. We learned to keep a shared spreadsheet with deadlines, but also to write reminders on sticky notes and put them where we couldn't ignore them. On the coffee maker, on the door we opened most. We learned to be kind to the person at the other end of the phone, even when the system they work inside was confusing or slow. We learned that a hand on a shoulder can evacuate most of the fear from a room. We started documenting our days not just for the immigration process, but for our own hearts. That's what you're watching now, in a way, a collection of moments that turned into a life. We filmed our morning walks the way our shadows look on a sidewalk in winter. We filmed the time we tried to put together a bookshelf without looking at the instructions, and then looked at the instructions and laughed until the cat hid under the couch. We filmed the first snow we watched together from the same window. He expected it to be quiet. I told him snow has a sound like a whisper and the rug under an old record player. We made friends as a couple. This might sound small, but it's not. People knew us together, not just as two people they liked individually. They invited us over for board game nights and texted group messages that said, "Who's bringing salad?" and then argued about what counts as a salad. We went to Pride and stood near the curb with teenagers and grandparents and allies who clapped for every float like it was their cousin graduating. We wore the shirts my sister made us with the tiniest rainbow on the pocket. We held hands. We kissed when the marching band hit our favorite song. We kept visiting his family, too, because borders can be stories as well as lines. We saved for flights and photos, and we learned to pack presents that would fit under an airplane seat. We saw his cousin graduate in a dress that looked like joy stitched onto fabric. We watched his grandfather fall asleep in a chair, while we all shouted about soccer and pretended not to notice. We stood on his mother's back porch in the afternoon and talked about tomatoes and the feeling of rain before it arrives. We kissed goodbye in driveways and didn't make it look tragic. Goodbyes can be gentle, too. Over time, the fear that had been our quiet companion packed its suitcase and moved out. It still came to visit sometimes, when we filed to remove conditions on the green card, when we checked a case status page and saw the same words for months. But we knew what to do. We made tea. We made lists. We took walks. We reminded each other that we had already done hard things. We reminded each other that the point was not only to survive, but to live like we'd earned it. We renewed our vows on a Tuesday because we felt like it. We went to City Hall with our closest people, and we said the simple words again. Then we went to a diner that has been here longer than either of us and ordered pie for the table. The waitress brought extra napkins like she knew we would need them. My mother gave a toast about paperwork and kisses. Mateo's abuela blessed the coffee in a way that made everyone feel like their morning would be better for it. We drove home with the windows down in the kind of quiet that means you don't need to fill it. And in the smaller days, we did what people lucky enough to have smaller days do. We did laundry and argued amiably about socks and the mystery of where they go. We bought a rug we both adored and then immediately spilled something on it and learned how to clean a rug together. We answered questions from friends starting their own immigration journeys and said, "This is what worked for us. And we're here if you need a person to sit with you while you fill out a form." We made ourselves available to the new waiting rooms, the new quiets, the new joys. If you are watching this because you are in the middle of your own long-distance story, or because you are standing at the edge of an immigration process that looks like a mountain, I want to say this with the same care someone handed to us once. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to be angry at the slowness of things. You are allowed to celebrate the small steps like they are big because, frankly, they are. You are allowed to ask for help. Keep your rituals. Protect your humor. Write down the dates. Take photos even when you think you will remember the details because the human brain is busy and love deserves a record. And if you are older and watching this with a cup of tea because you worry about us or worry about someone you love, thank you. Thank you for asking good questions and for baking cookies and for writing letters. Thank you for the notes we still have on our fridge. Mateo's abuela sent us a postcard with a drawing of a bird and wrote, "Birds fly far and still know home." We read it on days when we forget that we are allowed to belong in more than one place. Tonight, as we film this, the kettle sings in the kitchen because every good story needs background music. Mateo brings me tea like he always does, cup warm against my hands. He sits next to me, knee against mine. Our cat jumps up, uninterested in immigration law, but very interested in a lap. We look at the camera and at each other, and at the little pile of documents we keep in a basket, because we will probably always be people who keep important. Things where we can see them. We survived long distance and immigration together. Those are the headlines, but living through it taught us that survival is only one part of the story. The rest is building a life that doesn't apologize for existing. It's the text in the middle of the day that says, "Got you a pastry," because you passed a bakery and the window reminded you of someone's smile. It's the confidence to say, "My husband," in any room. It's the patience to talk slowly when the right words are taking their time. It's the kindness to let someone love you in the way they know how, and the curiosity to learn their ways too. If you walked into our home right now, you'd see a bowl on the table with fruit and maybe a ring. Not because we're always proposing to each other, but because life has a way of circling back to the places where it first felt like its truest self. You'd see that little fox my sister made and the paper cranes Mateo folded during one long wait, one for every month we were apart. You'd see the bracelet that still digs into my wrist sometimes, the woven threads holding, proof that some things you buy on a whim become talismans if you keep them long enough. We keep adding to the wall of frames, our first pride together here, the visit to the lake with the green card, the goofy photo booth strip where we missed the first 2 shots and only caught the last one because we were too busy laughing. We framed a copy of our first receipt notice, not because we love bureaucracy, but because we love what it represents. The day we said, "Okay, mountain, we see you. We know how to climb." We framed a photo of his mother hugging me so tight my glasses fogged up. We framed the sunshine on our wedding cake because sometimes light is the subject. We don't know what the next chapters look like. No one does. We know we want to plant a garden this spring and try to coax tomatoes out of a suspiciously shady corner of our yard. We know we want to drive to the mountains and get lost in the way you can only get lost when you're more found than ever. We know we want to keep showing up for our families. We know we want to sit on the couch on nights when it rains and talk about nothing until it becomes something. If you're taking notes for your own story, here are the only lines worth borrowing. Hold hands when the room is scary. Eat when you're angry. Say the dates out loud. Make copies. Laugh if you can. Cry when you need to. Let people help. And believe stubbornly that a love real enough for the mundane is a love strong enough for the storms. I think that's the lesson our story keeps handing back to us. We met on a Tuesday. We married on a Saturday. We survived Mondays that were cruel and Thursdays that were generous. We have 1,000 quiet Sundays waiting. The piano fades. The lamp stays warm. Mateo squeezes my knee the way he does when he wants to say, "I'm here," without interrupting. I want to end this in a way that gives you something you can put in your pocket. Here it is. When you are far apart and when you are close together, you are the same two people. You are capable now of the tenderness you will need later. You are building muscles you don't even know the names of yet. Patience, grace, persistence, humor. One day you will use them without thinking. And someone at a grocery store will hand you their cart and say, "You look like you know what you're doing. We'll turn off the camera soon, finish our tea, and start picking dinner." Maybe that soup we invented during those sick weeks. Maybe pancakes for dinner because that's a thing grown-ups can decide without permission. We will stand in the kitchen where I said yes, where I will keep saying yes in 100 small ways. Yes, I'll take the trash out. Yes, I'll try the new salsa even if it scares me. Yes, I'll listen even when I have advice. Yes, I'll keep choosing you in this, across forms and flights and quiet days, because there is no border sturdy enough to stop a love that keeps showing up. And if one day you find yourself at an airport, handshaking as you look for the person you've held in 1,000 pixels and 1,000 prayers, I hope you feel what we felt that day, like the ground had remembered your feet. I hope you hug and exhale and know that whatever comes next, you are not a beginner at this. You have been practicing the art of staying the whole time. You know how to make a home in conversations and calendars. The plane lands. The doors open. You walk, and the life you built at a distance steps forward to meet you. We survived long distance and immigration together, and we didn't just survive. We listened. We learned. We laughed in lines and in waiting rooms. We loved each other on purpose. And if you need to hear someone say it out loud, hear us. You can do it too. Bring snacks. Bring patience. Bring the version of yourself that believes in the simple miracle of two people choosing, again and again, to be on the same side of whatever comes.